Okay, now we're ready. Thank you for your patience. And again, what a great conference. We're heading day two, second session, and I'm so honored and pleased to introduce our next guest, John Bennison. John, if you don't know, is the director of HUD's Office of Departmental EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity, which sometimes we use those abbreviations and we forget the importance of what those words stand for. John's been with us about 3 years. Since 2013, he served as the director of our EEO office. He's had, though, a long career as a civil rights advocate. He's previously served with the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights, where he oversaw that department's work on civil rights policy and education initiatives. John served with the EPA, the FAA, and OPM. And I have a great pleasure of working with John quite a bit, and he is passionate about ensuring EEO for all folks at HUD. Running an EEO office requires stamina, requires strength and energy, and I have to say there's nobody better suited than John. John has run 9 marathons. More impressive, yeah, give it up, yeah, absolutely. Okay, even more impressive, he looks great today, rested. He has a 20-month-old daughter at home, and trust me, that takes energy. So today, John's going to be doing a few things. He's going to provide an overview of the state of equal employment opportunity at HUD. He's going to talk about unlawful discrimination arising from a hostile work environment. And then lastly, he'll be presenting a video about diversity and inclusion. So a warm welcome to John Bennison.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing? Great. It is so great to be with you today. And Peter, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I'm just really excited to be a part of Chico's HR conference. I want to start by really providing some acknowledgement to Tawanda Brooks and to Peter Constantine and to Sheila Wright and to Felicia Purifoy and the entire leadership team of OCHICO, because this is a team that my office, we collaborate with you often on many different issues. The work that we do and the work that Chico does often is cross-cutting, and I just think that OCHICO is a model of collaboration, and I can just say sincerely that my team and I really appreciate that. And I also really appreciate the invitation to spend some time with all of you, have a conversation, present on what we're doing with the state of EEO, what we're doing to try and build a model EEO program. And I would be more than happy as we go through the presentation or at the end of the presentation to take any questions that you have. I heard this is a lively group with a lot of energy and questions. I do realize that I stand between you and your lunch break, so I will try to make this interesting and exciting for you. I am really happy that I'm not the presenter after lunch, because I know how that goes. I'm always like, oh, I'm so full and tired after lunch, it's like, so I'm just really excited to be here with you and hope that you'll find this to be an interesting and helpful presentation. So starting with the PowerPoint and just a brief overview of what I plan to cover today, I do want to talk to you about the mission and functions of the Office of Departmental Equal Employment Opportunity, talk to you about what we've done to build a model EEO program and the importance of building a model EEO program and the work that we still have to complete. And as Peter mentioned, I'll also spend a few minutes on a hostile work environment and what that means from a legal standpoint, what we can do to prevent harassment in hostile work environments. And then finally, we're going to close with a video on diversity and inclusion that Andrea Hodge helped us to find in terms of today's presentation. And I am remiss, and I must apologize. I really want to acknowledge Andrea too, and what an amazing colleague she's been in putting this conference together. We've worked together on a number of issues, and she's just a superstar. So I just really want to thank Andrea too for all that she's done for HUD, and just an amazing person. So with that, let's get into the presentation. And first, I want to talk with you about the mission and functions of the Office of Departmental Equal Employment Opportunity. So my office has authority delegated from the Secretary to enforce laws that relate to the elimination of discrimination in all of the department's employment practices. Such laws would include the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Equal Pay Act, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act. So there's a lot of laws that we enforce on behalf of the department with respect to eliminating discrimination in any of our employment practices. We are an independent office within the Office of the Secretary, and what's important to point out here is that we are a neutral organization. We do not represent management and we do not represent employees. We administer a process with respect to complaints of discrimination, and we are neutral in the way that we administer that process. And I will talk in the next slide more about that process, how it works, and what exactly it is that we do. So going to the next slide, the first function of ODEO is to process, investigate, and adjudicate complaints of discrimination. Let me step back and talk to you for a few moments about what that looks like on a very high level. And this is a pretty fast presentation. This is at a high level. For more detailed information, I would point you to ODEO's website on HUD at Work, and there's a lot of detailed information. I'm going to be presenting at a very high level. We can talk in detail as we get into any questions, but as I said, if you go to our website on HUD at Work, there's a lot more detailed information. But let me present to you a little bit about what the EEO process looks like. So if you are an applicant for employment at HUD, if you are an employee of HUD, current employee, or a former employee of HUD, you are eligible to come into the EEO process if you believe you've been discriminated against in one of the department's employment practices. So what does that process look like, and what does that mean? So I mentioned various civil rights laws a few moments ago when I talked about the mission of the office. So connected with the EEO process, and if you believe you're being discriminated against, it must be a basis that on which you're being discriminated against, connected with one of those particular laws. So it could be race, it could be sex, it could be religion, it could be disability, it could be genetic information, age. That's what, when we talk about a basis of discrimination, that's what we mean, and it's tied to one of those civil rights laws and the employment portions of those civil rights laws. There also must be an issue connected with the alleged discrimination. So when we talk about issue, what do we mean? Is it that you didn't receive a promotion and you thought you should have received a promotion? If you're an applicant, you weren't selected for a job, and you believe that it was because you were discriminated against because of one of the protected bases? Is it that you requested a reasonable accommodation as an individual with a disability and you weren't provided that accommodation? Those are the issues that might come up in a complaint of discrimination. So stepping back, there must be a basis, and then there's got to be an issue connected with that basis. So someone believes, an employee, let's say for an example, an employee believes that he or she has been discriminated against because they didn't receive a promotion, they were denied a promotion. They would then make contact with my office. They have to make contact with my office within 45 days of the alleged event of discrimination or when they became aware of the alleged event of discrimination. We then take the individual through an intake process. We get a little bit of initial information, and then that individual is assigned an EEO counselor. The EEO counselor will give the individual the choice of, do you want to go through traditional EEO counseling, or would you like to elect mediation, alternative dispute resolution through mediation? If the aggrieved party elects to go through traditional EEO counseling, my office has 30 days to complete that process. What that process looks like is the EEO counselor will do a limited inquiry to find out what's going on both with the aggrieved party and with any management officials involved in the alleged discrimination. And they will then act as a conduit between the two individuals, the two parties, to try and resolve the matter within the 30 days so that it doesn't go to a formal complaint. If the person elects mediation, we have 90 days to complete that process in what's called the informal or pre-complaint phase. And in that case, if mediation is elected, We pull management together, we get the complainant to the table, and we try to resolve the issue through a mediation with a neutral third party present. Usually takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. Everybody sits down, they hash out what's going on, and they try to come to a resolution. If mediation is elected, we ask that both parties, management and the complainant, the aggrieved party, come to the table in good faith to try and resolve the issue. For management, what we say is, if you're sending a resolving official, ensure that that person has the authority to truly resolve the issue. If you are the employee or the aggrieved party, we always advise, please come in good faith, please be realistic about the resolution that you're hoping to achieve. So let's say, as an example, the issue is someone didn't get the rating, they got a level 4 instead of a level 5. Well, for the aggrieved party coming to the table on that issue saying, well, and I want $300,000, it's not really necessarily a realistic expectation and not what we would view as coming in good faith. Of course, it's up to the individual what they want to ask for, but we really would recommend think carefully about what it is that you want to resolve this issue. If it's a matter of changing a rating, is it potentially just getting the rating changed, getting some training that may be needed, getting some specific information on what it would take to get to the next level next year? So that's what we mean by good faith. So that in a nutshell, and again, as I mentioned at a very high level, that deals with the pre-complaint process. Try to get things resolved early, lowest possible level. It's either through traditional EEO counseling or through mediation, and we hope that we can get things resolved in the pre-complaint or informal process. We always try to achieve that goal. But a lot of times, or sometimes, we're not able to do that. And then what happens is we move to what's called the formal complaint stage. In the formal complaint stage, an individual we would provide them with a notice of right to file after we've had an unsuccessful counseling or an unsuccessful mediation. We'd inform the individual we weren't able to resolve the issue in the informal stage. You have a right to file a formal complaint. That individual then has 15 days to decide if they're going to file a complaint. If they do file a complaint, we review it and make a determination as to whether we're going to accept or dismiss it for investigation. Most claims do get accepted for investigation. It's a low bar to state a claim of discrimination, so most claims do get investigated, but some do get dismissed. They're usually around a technical issue. Say, for example, someone didn't meet a particular time frame. They didn't actually initiate contact with my office within 45 days of the alleged event, or they didn't file their formal complaint within 15 days of receiving the notice of right to file. Sometimes we dismiss because an individual failed to state a claim of discrimination. So let me give you an example of that. We had a case where an individual came to our office, said, I want to initiate a complaint based on age discrimination. And the individual said, I'm being discriminated against because I'm younger than everybody else in my office, I'm under 40, and I'm not being treated right. So we, in the counseling phase, explained to the individual, well, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, that protection only applies to individuals 40 and over. But the person said, well, no, I still want to go through counseling. I want to try and see if I can work this out. We're required to take the person through EEO counseling, which we did. It was not resolved because management knew that the law, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, did not apply to this individual. The individual decided to file a formal complaint, and we dismissed it for failure to state a claim because the individual was under the age of 40. So accept, dismiss phase, most get accepted, some don't. If they get accepted, we then move to what's called an EEO investigation. We have 180 days to complete that process. We contract exclusively with the U.S. Postal Service now to conduct our investigations. That's a change we made in 2014. We've been very happy with that change. Prior to that change, we had a significant backlog on our investigations. We were well over 180 days. We now have an average processing time of 132 days. In the investigation, the formal investigation, our investigators will interview the complainant. They'll interview the complainant's witnesses. They'll interview management witnesses, gather documents, put together an extensive report of investigation. That report of investigation, at the end of the investigation, is provided to the complainant. The complainant then has to make a decision. Do I want to request a hearing from the EEOC, or would I like to request a final agency decision from the department's EEO office? If the individual requests a final agency decision from my office, we have 60 days to issue that decision as to whether discrimination occurred or not. If they go that route and they disagree with any part of our decision, they can appeal our decision to either federal court or to the EEOC. The agency cannot appeal any part of that decision because we're making that decision on behalf of the secretary and making recommendations to the agency in that decision. They could also, as I said, the complainant, once they receive the report of investigation, could go to EEOC for a hearing. If they do that, the jurisdiction of the case then leaves my office while the hearing is pending at EEOC. And if that is the case, then we also furnish the Office of General Counsel with a copy of the report of the investigation because they'll be defending the agency in the hearing. Let me stop there. That's a lot of information I gave you. I know it's a lot, and that's at the high level, believe it or not. So there's much more detailed information online. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions before I go on to my next bullet point. And by the way, in case you don't know, I'm legally blind, so if you're raising your hand, I'm not going to see you. You're going to need to do a verbal cue or use a microphone. If there aren't questions, I'll just move on.
Or if folks have questions, we'll make sure raise your hand and make sure that's so. You know this is a lively audience.
Okay. No, there might be questions later, and that's fine. Okay. So the next bullet point that I want to talk about is our obligation to identify potential barriers to equal employment opportunity at the department and to address such barriers if we identify them. And this is really the proactive part of my office, what we're supposed to be doing. Part of the requirements of the law and regulations are not just that we enforce the complaint process and administer the complaint process, but that we proactively work to identify potential barriers on an institutional level to EEO and address and eliminate those barriers if we identify them. We do this in two ways. We look at two distinct areas. First, we look at the department's workforce and applicant pool. We're trying to determine if underrepresentation exists for any particular group, and how we do that is we compare the representation of various groups by race, national origin, and gender to the availability in the civilian labor force and their participation rate in the department's workforce as well as the applicant pool. So what we're looking at are any groups underrepresented. We also break that down by looking at major job occupations to determine if underrepresentation is occurring in major job occupations, compared against the availability in the civilian labor force. And we do it we look at higher grade levels and the SES to see if there's underrepresentation. We are about to issue the department's annual report. It's called MD 715, Management Directive 715, which fully addresses the state of EEO at the department and in particular focuses on workforce representation. The major issues that we're going to be looking at this year and going forward are the representation or significant underrepresentation of Hispanic males at all levels of the agency's workforce and in major job occupations, underrepresentation of Hispanic females at the senior levels of the agency's workforce, underrepresentation of Asian American and Pacific males and females at the senior levels of the agency's workforce, significant underrepresentation of individuals with severe disabilities at all levels of the agency's workforce. And so those are really the significant issues that we're looking at going forward. We need to do a deeper dive into understanding. So we know that underrepresentation for those groups exists, and what we need to do now is a deeper dive into the data to understand why are these individuals underrepresented? Are we not getting the applicant pool that we need? Are we not doing the outreach and recruitment that we should be to these groups that's broad-based, that's inclusive? What are management officials doing? Are we training management officials appropriately to think about diversity and inclusion when they're making selections? So these are all questions that we're going to be asking as we do these deeper dives into potential barriers for particular groups within the workforce. We also look closely at, as part of our barrier analysis, We closely review personnel policies, practices, and procedures to determine if any particular group is facing an adverse impact around those policies or procedures. So for example, we might look at, and what some of the things we're going to be looking at going forward are any groups not getting promoted at the same rate as other groups? Are some groups getting more awards than other groups? Those are the sorts of things when we look at personnel policies, practices, and procedures. We're also looking closely at reasonable accommodation and how are we doing as a department, how are our management officials doing in understanding the process of providing reasonable accommodation for individuals with disabilities. So those are examples of the two, when we talk about looking at potential barriers to EEO, those are the two areas we focus on: workforce representation, as well as personnel policies, practices, and procedures. And again, at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about collaboration, and that's why it's so important that our teams, OCHICO and ODEO, really collaborate, because this is so cross-cutting, the work that we do. Okay, in terms of the next bullet point of fostering a diverse and inclusive work environment, the next two bullet points, that and our training program really come together, and that's really about how do we create initiatives that are going to establish an environment where everyone who works at HUD feels that he or she can succeed to their fullest potential. And really for me, this diversity and inclusion comes down to one really important thing. How are we accomplishing the mission of the department? And I view actually the entire work of my office as supporting the employees of the department to be successful in achieving the agency's mission. And I see that in a couple of different ways. So first of all, we as a department, we serve all aspects of society. Every segment of society is served by HUD. We can only do that effectively if every member, every segment of society is represented in our workforce. That's the best way to serve everyone that's out there, our constituents, the taxpayers, right? The other thing is that we want to foster this environment where everyone who is working at HUD feels that they can succeed to their fullest potential. Because if you believe you're getting the same opportunity as everyone else, that things are fair, that you feel good about where you're working, you're going to do a better job on behalf of the American people. You're going to do a better job in terms of achieving the mission. And that also connects to the complaint process. If we can reduce conflict related to EEO matters within our workplace, we're going to better achieve our mission. Because think about this for a second. If you believe you're being discriminated against and you're coming to work every day, how good are you going to feel about the job that you're doing? How good are you going to feel about coming to work? You're not going to feel very good. So we want to resolve these disputes early and at the lowest possible level so that everyone can feel good. They can feel like they work in an inclusive work environment where there is equal opportunity, and then we can do a better, HUD is doing a great job in terms of achieving the mission, but of course we know we can always do better, and that's what I really believe the mission of my office is, to support HUD in achieving its mission. Okay, I'm going to move to, yes?
So when you say foster diverse work environment, so what are some of the things that you go out and train the offices? What are some of the advice that you give the offices on some of the things that they can do in fostering that diverse and inclusive work environment?
Thank you, Tawanda. That's a great question. Yeah, so we are doing a lot of training. We're training here at headquarters. We're going out and doing training in the regions and field locations. The sorts of things that we advise management and employees is, first of all, and again, connecting to OCHICO, engage your employees, have conversations with them, try to understand their perspective. Manage to diversity. You can't, when I talk to managers, I always say, you can't have a cookie cutter approach because we all come from different backgrounds. We have to think about the backgrounds that we come from and the perspective that we bring when we to the team, and engage the different parts of the different backgrounds that come to our teams. Really, I talk a lot with management about not being afraid to have those conversations with employees, and also we spend a lot of time on from the EEO side. For employees, we spend a lot of time on these are your EEO rights, but these are also your EEO responsibilities. Because a lot of times when we do training, employees think management is the only one who has the responsibility around EEO and diversity and inclusion, when in fact EEO is everyone's responsibility. Every one of us, from the secretary on down, has an obligation not to discriminate in the workplace. We all have an obligation to create an inclusive environment. I talk to managers and employees about inappropriate behavior in the workplace, and not to jump ahead too far to the hostile work environment piece, but really ensuring that our employees aren't feeling bullied, that they're feeling like they can express themselves and that they can feel like they're going to be supported, even if they say something where they disagree with management or they disagree with other members of the team. So I hope that answers your question, but that's a lot of what we focus on in terms of the training.
John, we have another audience question.
Yes.
Yes, my question is, years ago when I worked in the field office, if you were interested in becoming an EEO counselor, you didn't have to work for ODEO. They had training available to take so that you can become a counselor. Is that the case now, that you have to work for ODEO to be a counselor? Can you still sign up and if you're interested in becoming an EEO counselor?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So that's the model you're talking about. A lot of federal agencies used to use, and that's the collateral duty EEO counselors, where essentially EEO offices would enlist other employees who don't work in the EEO office to serve as EEO counselors to help support the mission of the EEO office. Most agencies have moved away from that practice, including HUD. And my perspective on that is the regulation really requires that anybody that works on an EEO matter be a direct report and be under the supervision of the EEO office on a full-time basis. So we have chosen at HUD not to do that, but we do have a number of counselors. We have a national phone number that we'll provide to everybody that can be called if someone believes that they're being discriminated against. We have an email box, eeo@hud.gov, that employees can use to make contact with our office, and we will quickly get a counselor assigned. But that is a model that most agencies have moved away from, and including HUD. And we do have a good number of counselors, and I believe that our counselors are very responsive on a national basis. And in fact, one of our counselors we do have outstationed to the Fort Worth region. And we're always looking at how can we enhance our efficiency? Do we need to place more of our employees in the field? We're really becoming a virtual world, so we're not necessarily sure that that's the way to go, but we're always looking at it and thinking about it. Okay. Any other questions right now?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I want to move to some of the progress that we've made up to this point. And when we talk about, first thing I want to talk about, and it's really exciting for HUD, I know there's been a lot of focus on the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey and the department's success in 2015 in improving, being the most, I think, Tawanda's the most improved agency? The most improved agency on the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, and that is really just phenomenal. One of the other areas where we've improved on the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey is in the inclusiveness quotient. The inclusiveness quotient is a subset of about 20 questions within the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey that looks at how is the department doing in ensuring fairness and opportunity for all? How do employees feel about their ability to achieve equal employment opportunity or to feel like they're included? And the department increased 5 points in 2015. The government-wide increase was 1 point. OPM makes major, really recognizes a 2-point increase as significant. HUD went up 5 points. And I think a lot of the initiatives I'm about to describe are the reasons that HUD had such a significant increase in 2015 in the inclusiveness quotient. So first of all, the expanded EEO policy statements. I don't know if everyone's seen the Secretary's policy statements on prevention of discrimination, prevention of harassment, and alternative dispute resolution. But if you haven't, they're on HUD at Work at the EEO page. The Secretary, for the first time in those statements, we addressed the rights of veterans and ensuring that we protect the rights of veterans in the workplace. Those same statements also included information on expanded rights for the LGBT community in the EEO process, rights that didn't exist prior to some EEOC and court decisions. So we talk about that in the Secretary's policy statements as well. In addition, in the past year, I established a veterans liaison position within my office. There's not a specific protection within the EEO process on the basis of being a veteran, but there are laws like USERRA that provide protection for veterans. And there was a lot of confusion amongst the veteran population at the department. What do we do? Where do we go if we have a conflict? So Stephen Smith on my staff graciously agreed to serve as the veterans liaison. And if a veteran has a concern, they can come and talk to Stephen. He'll help them navigate the process that's appropriate for them. If there's a conflict, we can potentially help to try and work that out. So that's another example of something we're doing. By the way, the department's doing a really good job of hiring veterans, and we need to acknowledge that. I think yeah, absolutely. And I think that what we just need to do is ensure that when veterans come into the workplace that they're feeling like they're included and feeling like they're working in a good environment. We're also connected with that. We're going to do a series of climate surveys this year, and one of them that we're going to focus on is a climate survey for veterans and how they're feeling about HUD. In addition, this past year I established a senior program advisor on alternative dispute resolution. You heard me mention earlier in the presentation that we really want a focus on resolving issues early and at the lowest possible level. Jerry Holloway on my staff agreed to serve as our senior program advisor on ADR. He attends all of our mediations. He conducts an analysis of the mediation, what worked well, where were there some things that didn't work well, did everybody come in good faith? That's helping us in developing more extensive training. Look for, towards the third or fourth quarter this year, we're going to do an ADR day. We're going to do an open house around ADR. We're going to show off our mediation suites here at headquarters. So we have some exciting things coming up to promote ADR as well. And Jerry's doing just a great job in that position. We held an EEO and diversity conference last June. And it was different than most conferences that people have attended in that we put our audience to work. We had some great speakers in the morning. The Deputy Secretary opened the conference. We had a great speaker from the White House, from OPM, talking to us about EEO, diversity and inclusion, the importance of it in our hiring and how we should approach it. And then we presented data to the audience about some of the underrepresentation and asked them to help us develop strategies to address that underrepresentation. Things like expanding our outreach to different communities when we're doing recruitment and we're doing hiring. Developing, we have currently an EEO outreach guide, but expanding on that, developing more web-based and application-based tools to promote expansion around recruitment and hiring and making it more diverse. Doing another self-identification survey within the workforce, just reminding people that it's voluntary, but you can provide your race, national origin data, your disability data in a confidential way so that we can ensure we're being accurate in terms of our workforce representation. Let's see. We also conducted this past year an LGBT climate survey to really understand how the LGBT community is feeling about working at the department, any issues. We're using the data from that survey to develop an LGBT inclusion training that will be a module with a broader EEO and inclusion training that we'll be providing later this fiscal year. So some results that I'm really proud of, and I'm really proud of my team. I believe my Deputy Director, Aisa McCullough, is here with me today. I just want to acknowledge, let's give her a round of applause because she works very hard. And I want to acknowledge her and the entire staff of EEO because everybody's working really hard to build a proactive program and implement a vision of success around EEO. So some of the results that we've achieved with respect to mediation, 60% increase in resolving matters through the mediation process. EEO complaints, formal EEO complaints are down 10% over the past year. Also want to point out, we just did our HUD-STAT meeting with the Deputy Secretary. Formal EEO complaints this year, we only have, up to this point in the fiscal year, we have 27 formal EEO complaints. We had like 60 formal EEO complaints by this time last year, at the same time last year. So we're seeing a significant drop in formal complaints, and I really think it's the proactive work, the work we're doing around training, the work that we're doing to engage the workforce, let them know about their EEO rights and responsibilities and so forth, and the work we're doing to resolve issues early and at the lowest possible level. And that takes me to the last bullet, the expanded EEO training program. We are doing a lot of training. As I'm going to be heading to several more regions before the end of the fiscal year. I hope to, for those of you that are in from the field, I hope to spend some time with you. And of course, if you think you'd like us to come and do EEO training like this, or training, more expansive training on the EEO process, we're happy to do that as well. The training is important, especially for the workforce, because as I mentioned, we can't prevent anybody from coming into the EEO process, right? They're going to, if we can't encourage or discourage anybody from coming in. But what we can do is educate and talk about this is discrimination, this isn't, and really think about, is this the right process for you? And we really think that that's also the education we're doing is part of lowering our complaint numbers. Any questions at this time? Yes?
So, John, if water comes into the, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. You have a question first? If an employee comes into into your office and asks a question regarding a possible complaint, and their question, when they come in and they ask a question, and the question is not, let me try to phrase this correctly. If they come in and ask a question about filing a complaint, and they're not quite accurate, do you ask questions first before they get into the whole process? So if I come in and I say I want to file a complaint on an action, my promotion, but I'm not exactly accurate, do you ask questions first before it goes through the full process, before an investigation starts?
We do. That's part of EEO counseling. So for example, the example I mentioned where the person who was under 40 came through the process, the counselor really advised this individual, this protection doesn't apply and you're unlikely to prevail or even get any kind of settlement with the agency. So a lot of times we do that, and we're actually starting to track the data now too of the number of contacts we have, because we have a lot of contacts that never go anywhere, because once they have that conversation, they decide, oh no, this isn't right for me. So that is part of the role of an EEO counselor, is to have that conversation, help to clarify some things for the individual, and hope that if it isn't the right place, that they'll make the decision not to come through. That being said, as I mentioned, we can't encourage or discourage anybody from coming through as part of our neutral role. So even if we, through the counseling process, ask those questions, do some clarification, really provide some more information, if the person says, no, I still want to go through, we have to take them through the process. So, but we're tracking the number of contacts because, as an example, last year, we had a total of about 120 complaints, formal and informal. 80 of those 120 went formal. But we probably had about 50 to 60 more, in addition to that, 50 to 60 more contacts where someone came into our office, said, I think I want to file a complaint, and then after they talk to a counselor, they decide not to go forward. So that is a major part of the role. Yeah.
John, we have another question.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to know, do you all have like a call number versus coming in and actually sitting down? Let's just say you feel like you're working in a hostile work environment or you're being bullied. Do you all have like a call number where somebody can actually call and talk to you all in reference to whether that is a hostile work environment or whether they are being bullied?
We do. I'm going to ask my staff. I don't know it off the top of my head. If Aisa, you here? Do you? 708-5921. 202-708-5921. That's the intake number. You can also send an email to EEO@HUD.gov. And at HUD.gov. Yes. Okay, we have another question.
In your website, you log onto your website, all that information is right there.
Yes. Yeah, you through the HUD at Work website, everything is right there. And I'm going to get into some more information. We have another question.
Okay, so this is with regard to mediation, ADR. I know we say that the office is a neutral office, but sometimes people are hesitant to go into mediation with members of the department because obviously they're employees of the department. So do you have actual mediation specialists within EEO, or do you use shared neutrals across the government?
We use, primarily we use mediators from outside of HUD. So our mediators either come from the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, which is another federal agency. We have a contract with them. Or we use, they're the primary one that we go to. If they're not available, we go to Shared Neutrals, which is for everybody, just for your information, is a government-wide resource of collateral duty mediators. We do have a couple of certified mediators on staff, but we rarely use those individuals. We really use them more for their expertise in mediation and helping us to develop policy.
Another question from the audience?
I have a question. Is it true that when an individual files an EEO complaint, that it puts a red flag on them for future references?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
When an individual files an EEO complaint, will it put a red flag on them for future references? Because sometimes people are hesitant to even go through the process because it's going to follow them.
Okay, thank you. So that's a great question. Let me say a couple of different things. So first of all, the complaint process, the EEO complaint process, is entirely confidential. So if you initiate and come into the process, and even in the pre-complaint, if you want to be anonymous, you can. It makes it more difficult for us to resolve things, but there is even an option to be anonymous. But it is confidential. Obviously, if we have to have conversations that involve management in potentially resolving it, so management will know if you choose not to be anonymous. But my staff, everyone, management who becomes aware, they're all required to keep the information confidential. And if they don't, that can become a serious problem and could be potentially a reprisal violation against the agency. In terms of a red flag, using your term, that should not be happening. And in fact, when I train management, I often say that you really have to compartmentalize. Receiving an EEO complaint or someone going into the process, I realize that can be emotionally charged. Someone is accusing you of discrimination. Obviously, that's an emotionally charged thing. But that is the right of employees to use our process, and the laws and regulations that we enforce are here for a very important reason. So we should allow our employees to use that process. And in fact, what I tell managers when I train them, 98% of the cases that come through ODEO or any other federal agency, there's no finding of discrimination because the bar for proving legal discrimination is very high. We only have about a 2% finding rate. But where agencies, including HUD, have more challenges is around reprisal, because if a manager starts treating someone differently because they went into the EEO complaint process, that potentially can cause a problem. So I advise managers, don't treat the person any better or any worse because they came into the complaint process. Like a lot of managers then will say, I'm not going to talk to the person anymore because I'm afraid to talk to them because they filed a complaint against me. No, part of your job is, as a manager, you have to interact with your employees. Same on the other side. If the person who filed a complaint has done something inappropriate that requires disciplinary action, or the performance is poor and you have the evidence to show it and you can document that what you're doing is an appropriate management action, that they're not immunized from that because they filed an EEO complaint. So that's a really important question. There should be no red flags associated with the EEO process. This is an employee right that every employee has here at the department and at every federal agency.
I have one more question.
Yes.
You might not have this, but do you have the statistics on the information being leaked out when someone does come in for a private conversation? Because this is what happens a lot in agencies, where by the time you leave the office after you filed your complaint, everyone around you knows that you filed a complaint. Do you have a statistics? Because I know you said that people will be punished if the information leaks out, but how often does the information leak out?
Well, I don't have any specific statistics with me today, but what I can tell you is my office and my management team, the two most important tenets of what we do are confidentiality and neutrality. So if anybody becomes aware of someone in my office sharing information that they shouldn't, please bring it to either Aisa McCullough's attention or my attention right away, and we will address it. We take it very, very seriously. So let me just tell you, and if that's happening, we're going to address it, and we're going to address it quickly. Okay, let me go to the final slide, and then I want to spend a few minutes on hostile work environment. I just want to talk with you for a few minutes about the work that we still have to do. One of the things we're really trying to do is bring when I got here to HUD 3 years ago, I was like, oh, ODEO, we're so last century. Oh, another question? I'm sorry.
Do we have one more question?
Yeah. At what point does the union, FG, get involved in the process?
Okay, so that's a good question, and I don't know if this is exactly the question you're asking, but one important point that I want to make is that employees, with respect to EEO or believing that they're being discriminated against, they can file either an EEO complaint with my office or a union grievance, but they can't do both. So you can't come into both processes on the same issue. So that's an important point. You know, I also don't know if this is really the question you're getting at, but a lot of times complainants are represented in our process by the union. So a lot of times someone who's a union steward represents a complainant.
So you can ask for a union representative during the process?
I mean, if you're a complainant, the union can represent you just someone who is a union member can represent you in the process.
And sitting on all the conversations they have with you?
If that's the choice of the complainant, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. So some of the things we're still working on, and I'll go through these quickly. We'll talk about hostile work environment and then see if there's any last questions. And if we have time, we're going to run the video real quick. But we're establishing within the next 3 weeks, hopefully at a maximum, an EEO e-filing system. So like I said, when I got here, I was like, oh my God, we're still using paper and pen and everything like that here in the EEO office. We got to get into the century we're in and make things electronic. So we are so excited to launch the e-filing system. Basically, complainant, anybody who believes they're being discriminated against, can initiate the process online. And you know, if you initiate the process online, you'll be assigned a counselor. That counselor will call you and start the process. On the formal stage, same thing. A complaint could be filed online. Complainant can track the entire complaint through the process. They'll get updates electronically. It's going to reduce some of the work that my staff have to do. So, for example, if we when we receive a formal complaint, we have to send out a receipt, essentially, notice of receipt of the complaint. The system will do that for us, so my staff don't have to put together a form letter and actually mail that out. It'll be sent electronically. We're also hoping to launch in the next year an EEO app that will be used to do push alerts, to send information out to organizations that represent the underrepresented groups I've talked about when job announcements go out, so we can help to enhance our recruitment efforts. We're also going to use that app because everybody today uses their phones to do everything, so that it'll be connected to our e-file system. We're going to continue to expand our training program, really build. We have some exciting, we're still in the procurement process, but we have some exciting training coming forward really soon that we're going to be announcing in the next week or so. We have a number of major initiatives to continue building on that proactive program. What I hope you've seen that what we've tried to do is implement a vision that moves the EEO program from being complaints driven. We're always going to be required by the law and the regulations to process complaints, but really move it to preventing complaints and creating an environment where everyone feels that they can succeed to their fullest potential, come to work, feel good about work, and do their best on behalf of the mission that we're trying to achieve here at HUD. Okay, any other questions? I'm going to quickly, if not, I'm going to quickly go into hostile work environment.
We have one,
One more?
question.
Okay.
Mr. Benison, with the promoting the greater inclusion, will that be a collaborative effort between your office and the newly executed Office of Diversity and Inclusion within Ochiko?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I know one of the buzzwords around the department, and this is not just at HUD, at all federal agencies, is I'm in a hostile work environment, and employees often think they're in a hostile work environment if they're asked to switch their telework day, or if they're asked to take one less telework day, and that does not a hostile work environment make. Okay, so let's be clear about that. Or they disagree with their rating. That doesn't necessarily make a hostile work environment. There are specific legal requirements to prove that you're in a hostile work environment. And there's really 4 elements to this. I want to read this to you so that I can be very clear about the definitions for you. In order to prevail on a claim of discriminatory hostile work environment harassment, a complainant must show the following, right? That they were subjected to unwelcome verbal or physical conduct. The unwelcome verbal or physical conduct was related to their membership in a group protected under federal anti-discrimination laws. So pausing there, it would be the unwelcome conduct would be based on their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their disability. It has to be connected with one of the protected groups that the individual falls into. Okay, the third element of a hostile work environment. The harassment had the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with their work, performance, and or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. And then the fourth element, some basis exists to impute liability to the employer, i.e. supervisor knew or should have known of the conduct but failed to take the corrective action. So that's, when we talk about hostile work environment, that's really the foundation of what you're looking for. That being said, and we get a lot of complaints with the issue being harassment, hostile work environment. And I think in the 3 years I've been here, there's only been one finding of a hostile work environment. That being said, that doesn't mean that inappropriate behavior, bullying behavior in the work environment is acceptable or appropriate. So we need to, especially those of us that are managers and leaders, need to really work to try and prevent these issues from occurring. We need to foster an environment where bullying will not be tolerated, because bullying can turn into harassment. As I was preparing for this presentation, I was reading about a case at Postal Service where the complainant was an Asian female. She was repeatedly subjected to racial slurs. She was repeatedly taunted by her coworkers. She raised the issue to her supervisors, who not only didn't do anything, they lowered her performance rating for essentially being a troublemaker, for speaking out. That's a hostile work environment, right? That's what we mean by a hostile work environment. But bullying and inappropriate behavior can quickly turn into a hostile work environment. And what management and leadership needs to do, if we become aware of it, we need to take appropriate action, including disciplinary action, providing training on preventing harassment, really ensuring that we have an environment where that will not be tolerated. The department has an anti-bullying statement. I know it's on Ochiko's HUD at Work page. We're going to link to it on our page. We have a prevention of harassment statement. I encourage you to spend some time on looking through those and figuring out what your role can be to help us prevent harassment in the department. The other important point, and this is how Andrea and I got to know each other so well, is that if an allegation is raised of harassment, the employee has the right to come to the EEO process, but the department has to also, management has to conduct a quick investigation to determine if actually a hostile work environment exists and quickly take corrective action. And that's what a lot of the work that Andrea does. She does those investigations for ELRD and just does a superior job at it. That's part of the process too. We have to have a separate inquiry process when these allegations are made. So with that, if there are not any other, are there any other questions? No questions? Do we have time for the video?
We do, and just housekeeping, I know we'll go a little bit long here, but we will shift the schedule back so you still have a full hour for lunch, so we still have time for the video, and folks, don't worry, we'll make sure you've got time for lunch and to start up. So turn it over to
This
you.
is thanks, Peter. This is a quick video from OPM on diversity and inclusion.
Hi, I'm Bruce Stewart of the Office of Personnel Management's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, or ODI. I'm here to talk with you today about the relationship between employee satisfaction and unconscious habits and how they impact diversity and inclusion in the workplace. At ODI, we evaluated data from the OPM FedView Employee View Survey, often called the EVS. We found that inclusion practices are positively correlated with employee satisfaction. In other words, the more we include all employees in activities in the workplace, the more satisfied the whole team is. Being a part of a team and being included in team activities makes a stronger and more productive workplace. What is inclusion and why is it important? Inclusion is our ability to include differences in a friendly, flexible, and fair way to make people feel welcome and important. What does inclusion mean to you?
Being at home.
Belonging.
Able to bring my whole self to work.
Feeling that my unique contribution was valued.
My perspective is always considered.
I have a say in what happens.
When employees feel valued, they work more productively. Everyone wins in an inclusive workplace. Why inclusion and diversity? Because of TRIP. Teamwork and talent, retention and recruiting, innovation and ideas, performance and productivity. Believe it or not, there's actually mathematical data that supports diversity as a key to problem solving. Professor Scott Page ran various statistical analysis and discovered that groups that had a diverse makeup and a wide array of backgrounds and experiences were able to solve problems far more successfully than a group made up of experts with similar backgrounds and experience. So why is that? Well, think about a toolbox. If you have a toolbox full of screwdrivers, all you can do is tighten screws. If your toolbox has a couple of screwdrivers, a hammer, a wrench, a file, pliers, and other tools, you can accomplish a lot more. Diversity in groups can accomplish the same thing. Now, we all know that we are supposed to include others and make everyone feel valued and welcome. But how do we make that happen in the workplace? How do we make the intangible tangible? Well, we use a new IQ, our inclusive quotient, which measures our inclusive intelligence. Inclusive intelligence is the intentional, deliberate, and proactive acts that increase workgroup intelligence by making people feel they belong and are uniquely valued. If you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude. The new IQ looks at our unconscious habits. Why focus on habits? Because we all have them and unconsciously act on them. Increasing inclusive habits gives us the new IQ. In our survey analysis, we found out that there are 5 habits that encourage diversity and inclusion in the workplace. What are those inclusive habits? They're for us to be fair, open, cooperative, supportive, and empowering. Think focus. You can identify behaviors that already exist and that need to change and use these new focus behaviors to encourage diversity and inclusion in the workplace, leading to more empowerment and better productivity. Let's start by looking at fairness. Fairness in the workplace means that arbitrary action, personal favoritism, coercion for partisan political purposes, and prohibited personnel practices are not tolerated. While it seems a no-brainer, fairness dictates that appropriate steps are taken to deal with poor performers who cannot or will not improve, and that differences in performance are recognized in a meaningful way. In addition, rewards are provided in a fair manner, awarded for how well employees perform their jobs, not for longevity or non-job related activities. Diversity and inclusion are also fostered by having openness as a way of doing business. In an open work environment, creativity and innovation are rewarded. policies and programs promote diversity in the workplace, and supervisors and team leaders are committed to a workforce representative of all segments of society as they work well with employees of different backgrounds. In a cooperative work environment, managers promote communication among different work units and support collaboration across work units to accomplish work objectives. When supervisors are supportive, it means that supervisors support the need to balance work and other life issues. Supervisors and team leaders have to provide employees with constructive suggestions to improve their job performance and talk with employees about their performance every 6 months. Supervisors and team leaders take time to listen to what employees have to say and treat employees with respect. The last focus habit is empowering. In an inclusive workplace, employees have enough information to do their job well and will feel encouraged to come up with a new and better way of doing things. In an empowered work setting, employees' talents are used well and employees have a feeling of personal empowerment with respect to their work processes. Unfortunately, we all occasionally fall victim to our unconscious habits. These unconscious habits affect our behavior negatively and impact how well we can implement the focus habits. These unconscious habits are the major challenge facing diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Unconscious habits are habits you might not always be aware of. These habits can influence how you make decisions or the way that you treat people and their ideas without you even realizing it. If you don't take the time to identify what habits you have, and we all have them, and look at how these habits affect your thinking and decisions, you might think there's nothing wrong with what you are doing now. To the outside observer, however, these actions and decisions influenced by these habits seem to be irrational or negative. While our unconscious habits are automatic and in some cases deeply ingrained, they can be changed through awareness of our unconscious biases. These habits come from unconscious biases, a term that refers to the attitudes that affect your behavior that you don't really notice. Unconscious biases influence our habits without our conscious awareness. Unconscious habits shape our thoughts and actions behind the scenes of our brain. And that's okay. That's just the way the human mind works. Think about how you might slowly pick up speed in a car when others are already speeding. This is an irresponsible act, but you do it because someone else already has done it. This action is due to an unconscious bias that because others do it, it's okay for you to do it. Unconscious biases also affect us in the workplace. As a supervisor, there are 3 different unconscious biases that you should be particularly familiar with and how these biases affect the workplace. These 3 main biases that impact the workplace are confirmation bias, like-me bias, which you may also hear referred to as in-group bias, and the broken windows bias. Each of these biases affects our habits, especially in terms of diversity and inclusion. Let's take a look at each of these biases. Confirmation bias is when you place more value on what you want to believe and place less value on what you don't want to believe. The confirmation bias leads you to be subjective when you're making decisions and removes any impartiality that you may have. When you use the confirmation bias, you confirm what you want to believe, not what the reality of the situation may be. The confirmation bias creates an unconscious habit of only seeing evidence that supports your decisions. You may have seen a manager who looks for concrete evidence that the correct decision was made instead of looking for ways in which a decision could have been improved. To avoid this bias, either consider whatever evidence you can find after a decision is made, even if it disconfirms the decision. At least you will make a better decision next time. Or avoid getting feedback from people who only provide you confirming evidence because they think that's what you want to hear. The like-me bias is one set of biases known as in-group biases. Essentially, like-me bias is exhibited whenever you give preferential treatment to members of a group you belong to. This is a bias towards a person who is like you as opposed to being different from you. One of the interesting aspects of this bias is that it has been demonstrated in randomly assigned groups as well as more organized ones. You can see like-me bias by members of groups who have been created through a coin toss or a random draw, even though they had no connection before. You will also see like-me bias by fans of the same sports team or people of the same religion. When we believe that someone else is in a group to which we also belong, we usually have positive views of them and tend to give them preferential treatment. If an individual is seen as different from us, we may be very leery of working together and make false presumptions about the individual. What happens then is that the like me bias creates a habit of working with people we already know or people we feel connected to. The connection can be as arbitrary as eye color or driving the same kind of car. To avoid this bias, always include others. Go out of your way to step out of your comfort zone and get to know some new people. You should also challenge any ideas you have about new people if they aren't like you. Just because they aren't like you doesn't mean working with them will be problematic. This last bias is the broken windows bias. This bias originates from a crime-fighting theory that says that stopping major crimes begins with stopping small ones. Under this theory, minor crimes like vandalism, public drinking, and littering create an environment in which social disorder increases, making it more likely that more major crimes will be committed. Put simply, our environment plays a large role in our behavior towards others, whether it's in your neighborhood or the workplace. However, we don't usually attribute our behavior to our environment, but falsely attribute this behavior to our core characteristics. The broken windows bias creates a habit of allowing the environment to affect our habits. It also allows others to create habits of falsely attributing our behavior to our own core characteristics instead of the environment that surrounds us. For example, an office that permits off-color humor may create an environment in which people feel less inclined to keep hurtful statements and stereotypes to themselves. To avoid this bias, remember that everyone is situated in their environment and behavior is influenced by this environment. Make sure your own environment is conducive for interaction. If you want to be inclusive, don't tolerate exclusiveness. Set a zero tolerance for exclusiveness and nip any issues in the bud. So, how do you change an unconscious habit or any habit? Habits work in 3 steps: cue, routine, and reward. A cue that triggers a specific kind of behavior, the performance routine that is triggered, and the psychological reward performing the routine. Change any one part of the process, and the other parts change too. As you work on a daily basis, keep an eye on whether you are exhibiting any unconscious biases. Remember, the focused, inclusive behaviors can help you change unconscious habits and help you to provide a diverse, inclusive, and more productive workplace. If you would like any more information on any of these topics, please contact ODI.
Yeah, let's give it up for John. A great presentation, great video. Thank you so much, John. So what we will do is, John, before you go, we have a small parting gift Tawanda's bringing over. Oh, maybe not yet. All right, we will be getting you a small parting gift. We don't have it right in our hands at the moment. It's on its way, trust me. For everybody else, we've gone a little long. Instead of starting at 1, we'll start at 1:15. And please note at 1:15, managers, you're in B180. The rest of us, we will be up here, and we'll begin at 1:15. We had a half-hour break this afternoon. We'll limit that to 15 minutes, and we'll otherwise stay on schedule. So we'll reconvene at 1:15.